The coffee's still kicked in? Everyone's still good? I get the distinct pleasure of being the person that gets to speak to you before the free drinks, so I know how anxious you all are to be in this room right now. No, thanks for coming out. Thanks for everything. I hope everyone's had a great show. I came in, it's been fantastic. I think this is our third year in a row being here. It's been fantastic, so glad everyone came out. Thanks a lot. So my name's Mike Bujera. I run the SE team for Canada here at Wiz. I've been around for about 2.5 years now, so it's been awesome to be, I was the only technical person in Canada. In fact, if you go back 6 months ago, Wiz literally was myself and 2 sales reps across Canada. As of today, we are almost 30 people strong. So in the last 6 months, we've actually managed to hire and find and onboard and train everything else about 25 people, which is absolutely great. So whether you're in BC, whether you're in Montreal, we're coast to coast now. We have representation everywhere. So anybody need anything, just find me afterwards. We'll get you hooked up with whatever you need, all right? We're gonna keep this interactive. I do not wanna stand up here for half an hour and talk to you, ask questions. We'll keep it interactive. Anything that comes up, please just raise your hand, yell, whatever you wanna do. I promise I do not get offended. And if I do, hey, well, we can have drinks in a few minutes anyway, right? We're good. So today we're going to go through, at a high level, we're going to go through the Cloud Security Maturity Framework. What is this? How do we fit into it? What do we do with it? How do we get there? What stage are we in? Now, this is not a Wiz presentation. This is actually just industry. We're talking about what you should be looking for as we move through the cloud journey, and how typical CNAPP tools such as Wiz can actually help you adopt that maturity. How do we keep the cloud safe? How do we make sure that you're not handing off your crown jewels to whoever wants to sell it on the black or the dark web, let's just say, right? So we're gonna go through some of this. Again, any questions you have, just ask. I promise I won't get offended. There's also a bunch of other Wiz people in the room. If there's any questions, we can hook you up with whatever you need. So let's get started. So where did this maturity framework even come from? Well, the biggest part of this is it's a whole new environment. So my white hair proves to you that I was around long enough that I grew up in a world where we hugged our servers, we put a fence and a cage around it, we put firewalls all over the place, and then we paid a very underpaid security guard between bulletproof glass to protect all of this in a colo, all right? That's how I live my life. And if anybody else here has done that, you know what it feels like to be trapped inside one of those turnstiles while you're trying to bring a server in at the same time, right? We've all been there if you've ever done that data center move. So when we get the cloud, what's this actually look like? Well, the whole world changes. We go from that world where we would hug our servers, hug our networks, and hug everything that was surrounded it, into now an environment where someone with a password can literally go in and alter my world. Simple as that, right? So it's a whole new set of risks. It's a whole new way to look at these risks. And it's a whole new way to figure out how to take care of these risks. And that's really what the maturity framework is all about. It's about risk. How do we identify that risk? How do we get rid of those blind spots? And how do we make sure we've got everything we need to make sure the cloud is secure, but also that we're not introducing new risks into the cloud? And that's what the maturity framework's all about. So we start with this new environment. And the biggest problem is, how do I get visibility? What do you even have? Everywhere we go, we ask the question, are you using AI? I don't know, maybe. Are you using this service from the cloud? I have no idea. Are you paying for it? I'm not really sure. It just goes to another bucket. So the first thing is, what are we even using in our world, right? And we can't even get a good handle on that. Back in the physical world, it was easy because we had to cut a PO. Somebody had to approve it. It had to get shipped. Everybody knew where this thing was. When we go to cloud, somebody with that password just clicks a button and it's there, all right? So it's a whole new world and operating model. The next side is those new risks that we talked about. And it's more than just looking at security horizontally, which is what we've always done. We had 50 different tools, and every one of those tools did one piece of the puzzle. Then there was an attack over the weekend, and you had to put 30 people in a room with 15 different consoles to try and figure out, am I susceptible to what just happened, right? How many people here can even tell me, look at what happened today with the AMD announcement this morning? Who in here is impacted, or more to the point, who here doesn't even know if they're impacted, right? I can guarantee you, I'm talking to my customers, they don't know. They're running reports to try and figure out, is this something I have to worry about? I remember it's been about 8 years ago now, Intel had the same problem. And the patch that they put out reduced performance by like 40%. It was not a good day, right? So now we're all trying to figure out, are we in the same boat all over again? So all these new risks are bubbling up every single day. Third part is a new ownership model. The same way, because that person with a password can just deploy things, how do we even know how it landed? How do we know how it got there? And more to the point, not how it got there, but how do we make sure that never happens again, right? We want to track that lineage. How did we start from here and how did this land in my cloud? So I know I don't have to ever worry about fixing that again, right? We want to stop it at the source. So this is these are the risks that we're seeing that we're trying to solve with these new Gen 2 tools. Now, how have we done this to date? Well, the reason I just said Gen 2, when we moved to cloud, the first move was the easy stuff. We did the V2Vs, we did the P2Vs, we started up with a couple of basic services, right? But at the end of the day, what we tried to do is use the same tools that worked on-prem in the cloud. A lot of tools that use a lot of agents, they didn't know APIs, they couldn't do auto-discovery, right? You had to tell it what to look for, and then it would tell you the risks associated with it. This doesn't work in cloud. That person that can just spin up a VM, spin up a new service, who says they're going to actually deploy an agent to any of this? And now you've got a blind spot living out there. So the tools that got us to cloud are not the tools that are going to let us get into the next version of cloud or cloud native, right? It's just not going to happen. If I've got to chase agents all over the place, it's just not going to work. So how do we get through it? So we tried to extend those on-prem solutions. So then when that didn't work, we tried to build it ourselves. I don't think I have to say too much other than the fact that not a lot of companies have succeeded doing the build versus buy. You can try, you spend a lot of money, and it's still not going to be able to do what you could have bought off the shelf and been off and running, right? Then we had the issue where every single cloud, while they offer you a ton of services, they're all independent. Azure is not very good at managing GCP, which is not very good at managing AWS. So now you end up with people with these dedicated services, and now you have to have specialists in all of these different groups. Well, what does that mean when a new attack comes out? I have to get 3 people in a room, they all have to run independent tools, they don't talk, and now I got 3 different ports that don't necessarily even mean anything to me, right? These are the problems that we have when we're looking at operations and incident response. So how did we solve that? All those blind spots. We looked at siloed point solutions. None of them talked. Monday morning comes around, that campaign just happened. 27 people need to get in a room with 27 different consoles, and we all have to agree that we're seeing the same thing and stitch it all together, right? This doesn't work in cloud, right? By the time I've run that report, I've already been hit and my data's already for sale, right? So, what we need to look for when we're moving to cloud, what we call cloud 2.0, is that unified platform. It has to understand APIs, but more than that, it has to understand every level. We used to have tools that would do data. We had tools that would do network. We had tools that would look vulnerabilities, but none of them talked. They were all point solutions that did something on-prem, but in cloud, they just don't wrap together. So now what we need to do is reduce that cloud risk by understanding what am I running, who put it there, and have an end-to-end view of how someone could get in, the risks that are associated with it, and what the blast radius is coming out on the other end. We need to understand what that risk profile looks like. Then we have to shift left, and our founder says this best. When you're building a house, you don't put in the carpet if the windows aren't in yet, right? I can finish everything inside, but if I'm allowing bad stuff to come in still, what was the point? I'm just going to be chasing myself the whole time, right? So once we've reduced the risk, we understand what we're running, now we look into those pipelines and we have to be able to look from source. Where did this come from? Why was this risk introduced? Let's go back to the person that developed that piece, make sure they can clean up the risk so moving forward, we don't have the problem again, right? And this is really what we're doing. There we go. And then the second part, so now we go, we have the full cloud visibility and risk. We shift left to make sure we keep things clean. Now we do day 2 operations or incident response where things are happening. Can I tell myself in real time, where are my risks? What's running in memory and where do I have to worry about these exploits right now versus what could I worry about next week, right? How do I prioritize all of this? And that's really what the cloud maturity framework is all about. In the beginning, what we're trying to do is get the visibility in that risk and understand who put it there, not so we can point fingers, so we can work with them to fix the source so this risk is not introduced again. That's the whole point. Fix it from the source. We clean up outside before we put in our carpet. Simple as that, right? So how do we do that? Well, the first CNAP, the first part of CNAP, let me start with a question. Who here knows what CNAP is? Who can tell me what CNAP actually stands for? And that was not supposed to happen. Anybody? Anybody? No one? Guys, I'm talking to myself here. Come on. I'm trying real hard. Cloud Native Application Protection Platform. The idea here is the left hand knows what the right hand is doing. Those siloed tools just don't do it. They have to work together. We have to understand all the risks associated in the cloud. So that's really what the CNAP is all about. Take all of the different clouds. There's more than the big three. As you move forward, you're going to have Oracle, you're going to have Alibaba, you're going to have all these other ones that are out there in time. Maybe it's the same cloud, but a different region. Maybe you're in manufacturing and Azure China is a big thing to you, right? All of these clouds are out there and we have to be able to protect them all and we have to see them all. It's not enough just to do the big three, because the big three is just the starting point. What we want to be able to do is use best of breed of all of these different clouds. So maybe I'm really big into data. You can make the argument that no one does it better than Google. You can make that argument. I'm not going to claim that on my life. But when I look at Microsoft, they are very strong when we get into infrastructure. When you're talking about off-the-shelf apps, one-click deployment, Amazon owns that. When we're talking about data, Google's made massive strides on that side of the house. So we need to be able to use the best of breed services in all of those different clouds, but we have to understand the risks between all of them. And that's really what CNAP is all about. Understanding cloud, orchestration, serverless, containers, VMs, PaaS, DaaS, all the other systems that are out there in the cloud, we have to be able to see them all and understand the full attack path and the risks. And that's exactly what a CNAP tool is supposed to do for us. The second part of it is linking all of those risks, right? So now in this example, what we can see is every used to be an independent tool that you have to pay for, right? You had a tool that did network exposure, did ping sweeps and stuff from the outside world. You had a different tool that looked at these patterns. You had a different tool that looked at data, that looking for PII, that looked at roles and IIM. How did you stitch all that together, right? That's what CNAP is all about. It's how someone comes in from the internet, moves through the environment, takes advantage of malware, CVE, exploit, misconfig, all the way down to how to database. That's really what it comes down to, right? These lights are hot. I'm really sweating under. Let's keep going. There we go. So let's dive in a little bit here. And these are some other industry terms you might have heard of. CSPM. Anybody know what CSPM is? There you go. We got a winner. Finally, someone else said something other than me. So CSPM. Well, what did that do? CSPM was really all about best practices of configuration of the cloud. It wasn't looking at risks. What it was saying was, when you deploy a bucket, stuff in there better be encrypted. When stuff goes in there better be logging on, right? This was best practices for configuration. CSPM, cloud configuration, right? The next part of the house is looking at those vulnerabilities. So now that I know I had a VM out there that maybe wasn't following best practices, now I can link the vulnerability to it. So now someone got into this thing that they shouldn't have been able to, and now they have something they can actually exploit, right? This is the second part of the vulnerabilities. Then we get identity tools. Well, just because I had access, how did they actually get in? Oh, they got in because they had a role that had access permissions that allowed them to get in, take advantage of a token or something, and move laterally through the environment, right? So we have to identify that. And that full attack chain is exactly what lets someone get into our database, dump it, and sell it on the dark web. Now look at a car. I can go park my car wherever I want these days in Toronto. The good part about it is I can probably buy my tires back for half of retail about 6 miles away, right? If you're lucky enough to still find your car. So understanding all these pieces of the puzzle, how it all ties in together. This is what we call a toxic combination. You're starting to see this as an industry term, right? It's not enough to know all the individual pieces. You have to know the individual pieces together to tell a story, right? There we go. Now, the next part of this is, let me change it around. Let me do it a different way. The last time any of you went into your console to look at the vulnerabilities or things you need to fix in your environment, how many warnings or how many alerts did you see when you logged into your console? Just from the top. Someone give me a number. Exactly. 8. You're doing well. In this example, we see 26. 26,000 events happen in my world. This is not an uncommon. I do a lot of work with banks, insurance companies. 26, to them, if they're at 26,000, that's a good day, right? They have a lot more going on. So we start with 26,000 events. But again, we take all those risks we just looked at, the configuration that we just looked of these objects, how they're stitched together. We go from 26,000, because we have that context and we understand where pieces play, it actually is only 2,500 of things that we need to really worry about right now. The rest is just noise, right? But then from those 2,500, we look at the risk associated with it. Just because a VM is publicly accessible, well, maybe it's a web server, maybe it's an FTP server, it's supposed to be. A database has PII in it. Well, it's supposed to, right? That's what a database is there for. But when it's all stitched together with excessive permissions and everything else, well, now it's something that can actually be hacked and will be targeted because there's a reason for someone to target it. A VM that was just sitting there on the internet, it's great. You can look at event logs and see it's probably being pinged 4 times a minute, right? No big deal. But it's actually when someone can get in and exploit a configuration, bounce through the environment and steal something. Now this is something that is likely to be attacked. CNAPP allows you to correlate all of that and be able to say, this is why I need to start here. So now we go from 26,000 events to 23 things on Monday morning that I need to worry about. But of the 23 things, what are the things that are going to impact me today? Can they shut down my crown jewels, my main database, whatever it might be? So now we can start designating what those items are and we triage those first. So instead of looking at 8,000, 10,000, in this case 26,000, we're down to 12 things that I got to worry about today. Wouldn't that be something that would be nice instead of looking at that screen that never ends, right? That's what CNAPP is all there for us. Now, once you've got all this inventory, this is all around blind spots. If we're chasing agents all over the place, there's no way we can keep up. We'll have blind spots and we have to live with it. That's what it's going to be. Version 1 tooling is what we called it, right? Built for on-prem, extended to cloud, but not built for cloud, right? So now we take that same information, and because we have inventory, because we know where binaries live, how things are configured, we shouldn't have to, when there's a campaign, we should not have to run around and try and figure out, am I at risk? A CNAPP tool should be able to tell you, yes, here you are at risk, and these are the things we need to start with, right? So that's exactly what CNAPP tools are supposed to do. Understand all the different technology, not just the cloud services, but the technology within your VMs, within your containers, the applications that you're actually running, right? We want to be able to look at all of that and be able to tell you exactly where you have pain points and where you're susceptible to attack, even in a 0 day, right? And if you have the inventory, which CNAPP is supposed to do for you, once we've got a CNAPP, it knows the technology and already took an inventory based on APIs. It wasn't relying on agents that you deployed. It discovered the thing automatically because it was based on APIs. So once you have that, you actually know 0 day where you have to worry and where you get started. Now, the next point of that is, well, we talked before. We finished the house before we put in the carpet, right? We put in the windows first. Well, if these risks are being introduced to our cloud, how did they get there? So now we have to look at a CNAPP tool that actually can extend left and extend right. So now we start looking at who put these objects there. What pipeline did they go through to land there? Who was the developer or the person that wrote that code that actually got pushed out to the cloud, right? All of this happens. We need to look at democratizing security so we actually can understand who put this there so we can go back and work with them, fix up the source so it never happens again. Again, this is not pointing fingers. This is part of remediation. Let's make sure that now that we've identified that risk, we eliminate it from the future. One less thing to worry about, right? And I'm going to skip through some of this here. Now, the next thing, AI. Who here is not using AI? That's what I thought, actually. I really thought I'd get at least one hand. What we're finding when we go see our customers these days is that we ask them, are you using AI? It's like, yeah, but I don't know what, right? John's got a couple of services running in the cloud. Joe's got some stuff running in a VM that's on-prem, but I don't have a handle on it. I just know that we're using it. It's all over the place, right? So these are some of the stats that we see out there, but all of this to say, AI isn't going away, right? I don't know, and they're only getting better. In fact, I was just playing with DeepSeek the other day. I want to see what the difference is with that thing. I got to admit, that thing was scary good compared to the other ones I've used, right? Some of these other tools I'd put in, I stick to sports, it's what I know. I ask it a question, what was the best play of Super Bowl 50, right? Make something up. GPT, OpenAI, stuff like that, give me answers. I use a DeepSeek one. It gave me a novel of the best play of the game, who scored the winning touchdown. It was pretty impressive. All of this to say, AI is not going away. We got to get a handle on this as well. So your CNAPP tool needs to be able to understand what AI is doing. Now, AI is generally based on, let's build this out here, generally based on your data. So any tool that you're using needs to understand AI and the models that are used in AI, but more importantly, understand the context of those models to your environment. Data poisoning is the biggest one we keep seeing. Garbage in, garbage out, right? Someone gets into a bucket that was publicly exposed, dumps their marketing data in that, and now you run that through your AI models. Congratulations, your competitor just used your system to run their marketing campaign, right? This is exactly what AI is going to do for us if we're not careful. So we have to understand all those pieces of the puzzle, and the CNAPP technology needs to be able to keep up with those latest threats. Again, if I'm deploying agents, I'm already behind the scenes. It has to be API based, or I will never catch up to this, right? Try to get my good side. The ones that are not sweating so much, it's crazy hot. So the next part of this is there are a lot of emerging technologies coming out. So now we look at industry frameworks around AI. The tool needs to be able to look at the frameworks. Am I passing? Am I not passing? How does this all work, right? So whatever tool you're using, it has to be able to understand these new technologies, but more importantly, has to be able to link those pieces together. In short, that often means DSPM tools. Who can tell me what DSPM stands for? I'm trying to keep you guys awake before the booze. There we go. This guy needs to come up and do the presentation. All right. So we have to understand all these pieces of the puzzle. That means understanding what is my data, right? I have internal numbers, employee numbers, I have customer numbers, right? I have to understand my environment, and it has to be able to discover my environment and tell me what is a pattern. I can't tell it. It's going to be changing all the time. This has to be able to discover, it has to know it has to see what's going on, and it can correlate what's happening. So we tie all of that back to industry frameworks and expose what are the crown jewels, what are the things that absolutely cannot get out. And more to the point, when we talk AI, this sensitive data can't be part of those models, right? PII should not be going in these public systems. Otherwise, sooner or later, I'm gonna go on to DeepSeek or GPT, type in your company name, and I'm gonna get a full list of everyone who works there. That's gonna pop up. We're seeing that, I'm getting that question everywhere we go. Can you please tell me if my sensitive data is sitting in GPT? I'm getting it all the time, right? So whatever tool you're using has to understand how all of this plays together. Right? Am I getting cut off already? I'm good? Okay, got a couple of minutes left. All right, so we've talked about AI here. So, skip through some of this. We've just talked about all of it. Okay, so now we get into developing securely. So now we have visibility of the cloud. We know where everything lives. We know what services are running. We know how it's all connected. Now, we already talked about shifting left. How do I make sure that it doesn't land in there again, right? That's the whole point of what we're trying to get to is root cause here. And that's exactly what a CNAPP tool needs to do. It's not enough to understand what's in the cloud. Your CNAPP tool has to understand how it's landing in the cloud, how it's getting to the cloud. So most CNAPP tools at this point, if they are in the quadrant, their leader, they're going to be able to connect directly to your version control system. So this means going to GitHub. This means integrating with ADO to do the pipelines, right? So this is where we put the gates on everything that make sure, okay, these are the rules that the cloud is actually being judged by. But what we find when we go talk to our customers is the people that are running the pipelines are playing by a different set of rules. They're playing by rules, but different rules. What that means is they run their scan and it says thumbs up, life is good, you're doing everything right. Now you push it into the cloud and it's failing all the rules there. How do we correlate that to a single database? So what the developers are doing is playing the same sport as what's going on in the cloud, right? And that's always typically been the challenge. Developers love their tools that they had in their sandbox, but they were not the same as what was going on in the cloud. And the result was, not that they did anything wrong, was bringing down my compliance scores because it was a different set of rules. So my cloud security scores were dropping, even though no one ever did anything really wrong. So we have to have a way to have a unified database so whatever's being pushed from development is playing by the same rules as what the cloud guys are running. That way, we're not running into any blind spots, right? I'm trying. There we go. All right. Now the second part of that, that's the gating, right? So we want to make sure that as we're doing deployments, pushes, things like that, it's actually playing by the same set of rules. It's being stopped landing in my cloud if it wasn't passing those rules. Now the second part of that is, okay, fine, it made it in there. Now a 0-day comes out. Yesterday, this was fine. Today, it's no longer fine, right? It's a CVE, it's whatever it might be. So your CNAPP tool needs to actually be able to track lineage as well. It's not enough to just say, I have to block that. I have to know who developed it. I need to know who did the pull, who actually did it. I need to know all that information as well. There's a lot of different ways and there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle there. That's a lot harder than it sounds, and it doesn't even sound easy. It's a lot harder than that. I'm looking at Terraform files. I'm looking at manifest files. I'm looking at YAML files. I have to understand all of this to be able to say, when I'm doing that development, the IAC scanning or the push, well, I have to understand to interpret what all of that is, right? So now we have to go back and who put it there? What was the pull request? What was the ID? So we can go back to the exact push that happened that actually introduced that vulnerability into our environment. So we have to be able to go all the way back to the source and understand exactly who it was that pushed that. That's truly what a CNAPP tool is there to do. Clean up what's in the cloud, shift left and make sure that you're not putting bad stuff into the cloud, and we'll talk about what we do on the right very shortly. Okay? And I'll blast through some of this. We talked about all of that. And now we go to the right. I clean up my cloud. I stop bad stuff from landing in my cloud. But what happens when I'm in a 0 day? Well, the CNAPP tool that used APIs is actually going to be able to tell you the services that are running, how they got there, all the stuff we talked about. But now because I have that, I'm at a 0 day. Something just happened. How do I correlate? Do I have to worry? Now, we talked in the very beginning, it takes 27 people and 15 consoles to tell me that answer today with the legacy tools. Well, your CNAPP tool better be able to come in here according to the maturity framework. We have to be able to respond to threats. So waiting a day or two to get the answer isn't sufficient. By then, I'm already hacked, right? Tool has to be able to tell you. So now, according to Gartner, a CNAPP tool is actually going to have runtime, what's running in memory, as well as the lineage, as well as any risks associated with it. So any CNAPP tool that you're going to look at, if you want to complete that maturity framework, really what's happening here is this has to be able to tell you not only what the misconfig or the vulnerability is, but which of them are actually running in memory. What are the things I got to worry about right now? If it's on there on a VM that's not turned on, okay, that's important, I'll patch it. But if it's turned on and running in memory and actively trying to reach out to bad places, we need to know about that too, right? So that's really where the day 2 response comes in. So even Gartner will tell you any CNAPP tool should have runtime in there as well. And that all ties back to that maturity framework. And then finally, understanding that runtime, the data plane, the CSP, the Kubernetes, version control, identities, right? The CNAPP tool should be able to reach out to third-party systems, right? There's no one tool that's going to know all of this. And you've got 50 years of IP and processes that have been created in the past to actually resolve this kind of stuff, right? So any tool you're using has to be able to integrate with what you're already running, right? It has to integrate with your process. It has to integrate with your systems. So having one tool that acts as a platform, which is really what the CNAPP is all about, and really that cloud maturity framework of understanding all of these risks, that's literally this in a nutshell. Understand what's running in memory. Understand the data that's out there and the risks associated. Understand what's happening on the control plane and the best practices. Understand what's happening in my development environment, all the way down to source and who has access to all of this information. Really, this is a cloud maturity framework. If I have all of these pieces of the puzzle, I've actually cleaned up what's in my cloud, I'm preventing bad things from landing in my cloud, and when a 0 day comes along, I know exactly how to remediate it because I had all the information in one plane to give me all of the risk across all of those risk domains, right? And that has traditionally been absolutely the hardest thing to do. Too many tools that did one thing at a time and they didn't talk. Cloud Maturity Framework actually gets away from that risk. It's one plane that actually understands those risks and bubbles it all up together. And that is it, and I'm done 5 minutes early. So we have time for questions. He's been answering everything. Who else has something?
I have one.
Okay, he's up.
So you mentioned code as well, right?
Yep.
So there is SAS scanners, DAS scanners, which comes in for the AppSec. I think we are using Veracode for that.
Yep.
Okay. The CNAPP tool, should be basically everything which ties into CNAPP and CNAPP ties into Azure, or how do you visualize this when you go down that waterfall model?
There's a couple of ways to do it. So it depends on the CNAPP tool you're using. So this is not supposed to be this is not a whiz discussion, right? So when we just talk in general, there's a couple of ways to do it. The point is that the risks are available to you in one platform and it understands the risks. So either the tool natively knows how to reach out and do that. However, a lot of developers love their tools and they're not going to change it. So if you can't take it in natively, then you have to be able to integrate what's there. And integration does not mean, hey, I'm going to send my data to it and it can go do something. That means in the platform that you're running and you're managing, it has to be able to integrate or pull those risks from third-party tools and visualize it for you. Giving you yet another report that maybe is launched from the same tool doesn't help you. You're in the same spot. Big deal if that ran the report or that ran the report. The important part is they understood each other. That's the part that's missing. So SAST, DAST, all of these things, whether you import it or do it natively, it has to understand those risks. And that's really how we normalize it. Yep. Yep. Yep.
And there's no way one console where we can go in and look at the vulnerability management. There's always like fragmented approach. So that's what I'm trying to understand whether that is our purpose.
So where's your pain point? Is it on Twistlock? Is it on Bridge Crew? Or is it the new console that was supposed to integrate all of that and make it look like one tool? Exactly, right? There are tools out there that can do what you're asking. But again, Cloud 1.0 versus Cloud 2.0. Cloud 1.0 was based on old technology that's been migrated to the cloud versus new CDAP tools that are born in the cloud that have that integration. They understand those third parties. It's not so easy for legacy companies to come along, buy a company and integrate it. Different code base, different tech, different queries. So they put a GUI on the front and call it one product integrated. That's not integration, right? That's not what it does. There's other tools out there now, API-based, that understand all the way from that lineage. And if you can't do it natively, or maybe you do it natively and use checkmarks, varicode, something like that on the other side, as long as you can import that and visualize it with the same risk profile, then you're okay. Now, I can do it, but I'm not. Yeah, call them. Yeah. Or one of the guys in the back. Uh-oh, here we go. Another one. This guy's been itching. I know you're waiting.
Thanks, Mike. Great prezzo. Also, thank you to Wiz for finding that DeepSeek vulnerability. That was
yes.
great.
Yep.
I mean, I presuppose that I'm giving all that information to the Chinese government, and I mostly just use it for brainstorming. But could you walk us through a common use case where Wiz helped a customer identify and remediate a critical cloud risk? So basically, like, and this is something that, coming from I'm a solutions architect, that I can broach the topic with less technical people to be like, hey, you might want to consider Wiz to come in and bring you a quick win.
A million examples I can give you, but let me give you one from one of the FIs here. I'll just leave it at that. One of the FIs here well, I guess they're all in Toronto, but one of the FIs. The biggest thing that we're seeing, especially in larger orgs, but smaller ones are seeing it as well, is correlating access roles in the cloud. Every cloud has different policies. So what GCP does is different than AWS, which is different than Azure, which is different than Oracle, which is different than everything else. So the biggest problem people are having, they're good with CSPM, they know best practice, they've got their compliance frameworks looking pretty good. But the risk that they cannot get their head around, and they keep having problems with it, is they're using legacy AD, legacy tools for the permissioning of those rules. And now what's ended up happening is it's not so much the configuration of those objects, it's the access to those objects. They don't have just in time to actually figure this out. So they have larger environments, more elevated roles, which add more risk because now anybody that gets access to that role can now have keys to the castle and do anything they want. So really it starts with identity, but it's really identity around the objects that are there, assuming those are already set to best practice. That's what all the FIs are struggling with right now. 80,000 employees, 100,000 employees. How do I map those 80 users to the roles that are out there? It's a full-time job, right? That's the biggest risk we see in the larger accounts. I think I'm getting the hook. However, I will be around, so I'm the last thing between you and drinks, so I'm going to stay here till the last person leaves, and then I'll meet you out there at the cart, all right? Thanks, everyone.